How about you, Mark? What was it in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that you were just really excited to dive into?
You know, it continues from the first movie, which was like, you know, I love, taking on really simple, relatable personal relationships and putting them in the context of something massive and extreme. I mean, that's what's fun. I mean, you get the little 12-year-old in me, it gets really excited to get up in the morning and blow shit up. But the thing that I think, what I realized when I was as I got older, is that the things that are meaningful and things that are exciting and things that I feel like that I enjoy doing the most are sort of the relationship stuff at the base, that sort of ground these movies. And I think if you don't have that you really can lose something. But that's something that it's really fun to do in the midst of, like you say, maximum devastation. Do something like small and intimate and like something where somebody's head turning means something. You know, I think that's a really fun, exciting thing to get to do every morning.
And Alfonso, in Gravity, what was it in the development of the script which you wrote with your son?
Yeah.
What was it that you were most excited to finally get to set and create?
Well, I guess that it was this idea of one single human floating in space, completely alone. And the idea of doing that character and turn everything into a suspenseful action film, you know, with minimal elements, and trusting that through cinematic media, I was going to be able to put the audiences in space with our characters, so enduring what the character is enduring.
So for those who aren't familiar, the trailer's out there, so I'm sure many of you have seen it, but George Clooney and Sandra Bullock play two astronauts who, there's an accident while they're in orbit and they end up stranded, unable to communicate with Earth, and they're just adrift. Right?
Yeah, pretty much that's what it's about.
How did you run into any technical problems trying to manifest, you know, what you dreamed up on the page?
Well, yeah, the whole film was a big miscalculation because when I finished writing the script, I sent it to Chivo, to Emanuel Lubezki, the cinematographer of Children of Men, among many others. And I said, let's do this, Chivo. It's 1-2 characters, it's very simple. We shoot it in 1 year and we're out of it. And for the next 4.5 years, he kept on reminding me that. You know, it's and the thing is that once that we tried to ground the script, it was very clear that the technology to make the film didn't exist.
What technology did you need without getting...
Well, the thing is that the characters are floating all the time. They're in zero gravity, and not only floating, but they are like spinning in different axes. And that doesn't happen in planet Earth. So we tried several things. We tried the famous vomit comet.
The vomit comet is, for those who don't know, a ship that goes up into near the stratosphere.
Well, it's a plane.
Yeah, a plane. But spaceship. It's a UFO that goes up into the stratosphere.
Well, the thing is that yes, it's the one that they use in Apollo 13 to zoom some of the scenes, which pretty much is called a parabolic flight. It goes up and then just plummets. In reality, you don't float. You're just falling. You're free falling, but inside the plane. So you have the impression that you're floating. And it's fantastic, so much fun. The problem is that you're limited to the space of the plane, and also that it lasts for 20 seconds. And the way I've been doing films, and particularly this film, requires very extended takes. So it was impossible to use it. So we had to invent some other stuff.
So what did you invent?
Well,
or is it patent pending?
No, it's not patent pending, it's just boring as hell. It's just a lot of, because each segment required different technologies, but the core of it was robotics. We use, you know, the robots that they use to build cars, that were adapted for cameras and lights, together with for a big chunk of the film of the shoot, Sandra Bullock was inside this 9x9 cube. That is a perfect cube in which all the walls are LED lights. in which she was in the center in a contraption that would gyrate a little bit. And around her, it was her environment, pretty much her point of view. And that would mean that that point of view was lighting her. So rather than having the character moving like this, the character was static and everything was moving around her.
What was this experience like for George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, who have to be put into this puppeteering mechanism and turned upside down and spun?
Well, the only thing that all these techniques they have in common is that they were highly, very, very painful.
Yeah.
They
sorry, George.
Yeah. And well, Sandra, whenever she was not insulated in the cube, she was just working out because it was the only way for her to, to endure the whole thing. But at the end, it was great. The two of them were fantastic. It's easier when they are separated because a lot of the scenes we have to shoot them separate. When they were together, they team against you. And the whole thing they had all the time was, it was like a competition they have about impersonating my accent. It was just an ongoing thing.
Who was better at it?
No, they suck. They're funny though. They play me as a Cuban.
That's so nice.
There's a difference, trust me.
Let's call it.
Not the ear. It's like,
So Mark, you also have actors flying through the air, the greatest of ease, or not so easy?
Well, flying is it gets really technical, but like there's a, like in the first movie and on this one, we tried to do, base the movement or make it as realistic and as grounded as possible. So, in the first movie, we built, massive rigs that were 300 feet long, and we would, fly, Spider-Man or a stunt double, Ilram, underneath this overpass in New York, and even the stuff that we ended up doing in the computer, we used that as a reference, because the trick is like a human body can only take so much, and the reality of the physics of somebody flying through the air at the velocity that Spider-Man would fly through the air is sort of mind-boggling and impossible, or very difficult to ask an actor to do.
Was there something that you wanted to see Spider-Man do in this movie that he hasn't done in your previous film or the previous Raimi films? Do you feel that pressure? Like, I've got to do
Sure, of course you do. That's the fun with villains, is that villains really are a foil for the protagonist, in that you want them to bring out some characteristic that you haven't seen in that character before. And that was, that's one of the reasons why we chose, Electro as the main villain, was to, have him sort of have to contend not just with the physical aspects of such a demonic, godlike force, but somebody who's, he has to, deal with him in a creative and interesting way. And those are always the fun moments, to get yourself into a corner, put yourself into a corner and figure out how to get out of it. And sometimes the corners are so interesting, but you really have no idea, and it takes a long time and a lot of meetings and a lot of spitballing to get out of that. But I wanted to do, I always thought like Electro was sort of more than Spider-Man, was like the most fun challenge in the movie to come, because there's something so magnificent about and beautiful about a creature that can blend and merge with electricity in that way. I thought that was something that I really wanted to explore. I have to be careful about that. We're getting plot points because I want to. That was an adventure, because when I was a kid, I was always fascinated and terrified by somebody who could disappear. You know what I mean? And again, like this, the thing with Spider-Man, you're dealing with characters that are, Peter Parker, more than most superheroes, is totally related. It's so grounded, it's so basic. Like, his problems, like he has to pay his bills, and he has to do his laundry, and he doesn't know how to do his laundry, and he has to do, like all these things that are the problems that I have, which are, really, really basic. But they has to fight gods, and I like the idea of, I find it very interesting to combine those two worlds.
What did you feel, again, without giving away plot points, but what qualities of Peter Parker do you feel Electro was able to draw out?
Well, I think, weirdly, the most important one is to empathize with those who you don't want to empathize with. You know what I mean? There's this thing that keeps going, this is a weird reference, but there's this documentary called The Fog of War, which was about Robert McNamara, and it's one of the most brilliant documentaries I've ever seen. And one of the things that Robert McNamara was talking about when he was reviewing his life, he said, empathize with the enemy. And I think in order to solve the problems that that Electro presents to Spider-Man, he has to empathize with him and try to understand him. I think that's something that was a challenge to bring out in the script. I think it was something that I think is going to work really well.
It's easier for the hero just to hate the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like, and it's good. That could be fun too, But I think there has to be some sort of emotional component to the conflict with the villain to make it more interesting.
So Edgar, you don't have characters necessarily hanging in the air a lot, but you have a lot of effects, a lot of fights, a lot of great fights in The World's End, and I wondered if there was something about the design. I don't know how much you want to reveal about the story. I think it's clear from the trailer. These guys go back to their hometown to do a pub crawl and end up stumbling upon an invasion of some sort. The fights that you show are over the top. I mean, how much did you feel you needed to push yourself in order to come up with those things?
Well, I think the challenge with it this time, which is something that the actors were really up for, was because the film starts in a pretty naturalistic place. It's like, almost feels like a reunion comedy about these guys together, and then, it explodes into these action sequences. But what we wanted to do, which is actually very different from stuff I'd done before, was try and do them without kind of cutting, so that you actually you believe that the actors are doing it, they are doing it. There's no obvious stunt doubling. So that was something I worked with this great choreographer, Brad Allen, and we designed a way to do it where we could basically evaluate the cast members. We're very lucky that we had 6 actors who were up for the challenge.
And list them for us. So
Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Martin Freeman, aka Bilbo. That's what he's contractually called now. Paddy Considine, the fantastic Eddie Marzan, and Rosamund Pike. So all 6 of them are in the action sequences, and all 6 of them trained with the stunt team. So we can do these sequences where basically, because usually if you look at a 70s James Bond film, very quickly the camera will go behind Roger Moore's shoulder, and it won't be Roger Moore. So we tried to design these fights where we're right in. I've just blown it for Alfonso. It wasn't Roger Moore doing all of those stunts. But so we designed these fights where we do them all in one sequence. Without giving too much away, another challenge was, and also I must say that the actors, were really up for it, because especially because Martin and Simon are both 40. But when you give them that challenges thing, when you put it to them do you think you can do it? They go, oh yeah. So you have to kind of basically, make it a point of pride. So I like to say out of the 3 movies, especially because they're the oldest, I put them through the most punishing action scenes of the 3. And they really rose to the challenge.
What counts as a punishing action scene?
Well,
punishing in what way?
Well, you'll see when you see the movie, there's, they're doing all of their own stunts. And then another thing that was an extra sort of challenge, which it was a scene that I'd cut out of Hot Fuzz because it didn't really work. I had this scene in Hot Fuzz where they had a little fight with some teenagers, and it didn't work because we used adult stunt performers and stunt women to be the kids, and it looked terrible, and it's not even on the deleted scenes, I don't think. And this time I had this idea, and I said to the choreographer, do you think, this might sound like a crazy question, can we get teenage stunt performers? And he said, yes we can. So there's a fight in the film with the 40-year-olds versus 15-year-olds. The 15-year-olds completely kick their ass. It's something else. So it was really, that was a great thing to... And in fact, one of the lead stunt performers, who was 15 and turned 16 on the set, was actually, he's a guy, he's a kid, he's a stunt boy in fact. He changed from stunt boy to stunt man during the shoot. He's
got his funny bits
birthday. It's like, today you are a stuntman. But he was actually Chloe Moretz's stunt double in Kick-Ass, dressed up as Hit Girl. So as a 12-year-old, he'd been Hit Girl. So this kid is amazing. His name's Greg Townley. He's going to be huge. And actually, I just wanted to sort of keep pushing myself in terms of like, can I get these stunt performers to be in the whole scene, not just be the stunt doubles, they actually are in the whole thing. And Brad, the coordinator, said, would you let Greg actually read the lines for the scene? And I said, sure. And he was great, he was very naturalistic, so he's not only the stunt man, he's in the movie, he's one of the stunt.
They're the actors.
They're the actors. And it just makes the fight scene so much more real.
And this
because you've got basically no doubles.
It's true, you know, that one of the, in my movie, actually, I was just thinking about like some of the physical challenges of it. One of the most difficult, but I think one of the most rewarding scenes that we've done wasn't actually an action scene, but like it was Andrew Garfield with a coffee cup and like a mail cart, and it was a sort of, it was basically like an old school sort of physical comedy thing where you have to, like, when those sequences play out, and it's stunt work, but it's kind of like dance, because there's people coming around, he has to prevent somebody from getting to Gwen, and it's like, you know, if you look at those old, you know, Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin thing, the camera just sits there.
Yeah.
You look at not only at the physical acumen of those people, which is extraordinary, and very, very different.
And there's a lot of timing and choreography.
And engineering of the sets and the environments around them. And that is something it's very difficult to achieve. People don't, I mean, especially when you can cut as quickly as you can, and films are just made in a different way. But God, you sense it in the room. When you can sit and hold, I mean, you're the king of the long take, but like when you can sit and watch and absorb characters doing sort of extraordinary physical things, it's a different kind of thing. I think about this, like, in 500 Days of Summer, like I remember seeing it in Sundance for the first time, and there's like a big dance sequence in it, and like people laugh, but there's another tangible kind of pleasure that people get from watching extraordinary physical feats,
that spectacle,
stunts, yeah, exactly, that you don't get very often, you know. And listen, in making the Spider-Man movie, I'm sort of obligated to deal with computer-generated elements, because there's things that just humans cannot do. I mean, are physically impossible to achieve. But trying to find the limits of that is really the fun part of it. But boy, watching somebody doing something that is very difficult to achieve, and there's like when you're working with stunt people. And I know we both work with Calvin Crystal.
Yeah,
this is great. Sort of
we have crew members between our 3 films that go across those 3 films. I just realized actually.
We brand them and pass them off. But there's this, I haven't figured out exactly what it is, but there's a different kind of pleasure. It's not a laugh. Like people don't, it's not about laughter, it's not about comedy, it's not about tension. It's some other pleasure that the audience gets, that I get from watching people do extraordinary things. And like physical comedy, which I think is an old and sort of forgotten art a lot of times, is something that really, action movies is the only place that it really takes place in. You know what I mean? And with the level of skill that with the, you know, where it looks really great, but it's something that I think is sort of lost. And I think that is something, there's a really exciting possibilities there.
But that has to be executed well, because I've seen a lot of Hollywood action movies where they spend a lot of money on the sets and the choreography, and it's almost overly choreographed, where you can almost see the actors thinking ahead of the punch that's going to come 2 moves from now, and it feels stilted to me, and there's no threat. I like when it feels like it feels like it's out of control.
It's this amazing physical comedy that has. It was centered around an amazing performer.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. I mean, all the other elements, the engineering, the effects, and everything were around that main performance, and that's I think what made the difference. And I agree with you. I think it's almost a lost art, and whoever nails it and does a film like that is just going to be absolutely great.
Yeah. Well, is the appeal of the unbroken take, and I think of the famous sequence you had in Children of Men where the car is attacked. And I know was that a great film, but if you strip away the rest of the film and you just have that attack out of context, it's still a great short film. But that really blew people away. And I know that there were visual effects and little ways that you adjusted it, but it didn't feel that way when you watched it. It felt like we're actually seeing something. Is that wow factor, that impressed feeling that you described moviegoers having, Mark, is that a response to the feeling that we can't believe our eyes anymore? That visual effects have advanced to the point where anything is possible? And so when we see a lot of quick cutting, we know Roger Moore isn't doing that stunt, but when it's an unbroken take, we think, maybe this happened, maybe they really pulled this off. Is that the appeal?
I feel bad that Roger Moore's getting a kicking now. Let me just say, I just loved him as Bond as a kid.
He did his best.
I think there's a thrill in that. Whenever something, the thing is, I mean, I'm sure this is the case when you did your long takes on Children of Men, and I've done like extended takes, more in Shaun and in World's End. It's also you get a buzz from the crew. Like everybody gets really invested in the shot because they can see it happening. And if you do the sequence that's in one take, you'll notice that everybody gathers around the monitors. It's like, did we get it? Does it work? And there's a real thrill in that because it's actually something where it really is in camera.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's why it's kind of exciting to do. And I think because audiences now are very kind of aware of how films are made and like how you can, you know, with quick cutting, it's obviously not somebody doing it, or, you know, you even have face replates now where digitally you can change people's faces, and you see that in a lot of action films. So I think when there's stuff where it's clearly done in one take, people really respond to it. And I think Alfonso's absolutely right. It's about the actor absolutely has to sell it.
Yeah.
And you know, Buster Keaton was like a master of like physical comedy. But almost the most impressive thing that he does is in these amazing stunts is have a poker face. Because I would not have that face if I was doing those stunts.
Yeah, but the other thing I think is, and for me, those shots they work when you don't think about them. You know, you're just partaking with one experience. And I think one of the keys and why people, even in comedy, like the stuff of your film, of the dance, is that people have a sense of real time.
Yeah.
Whenever you cut, even if you're not conscious of the cut, in the back of your mind, you know that time is being manipulated. And when you do a single shot, that's the thing. I mean, you're just absorbing everything in real time, and your engagement with that changes because of that.
But I think it has to be, I mean, those things have to be, I think Children of Men is a great example of it, where it has to be couched in a certain kind of tone. Because you do see movies occasionally where, like, the director will be like, I'm going to do the long take. And it doesn't feel of a piece, doesn't feel cohesive to the rest of the film.
Stands
I think
out.
what was extraordinary about Children of Men was that it just flowed very naturally, and that the entire attitude of the film was based on that sense of real time and that grounded sort of temporal space, which was pretty extraordinary.
I tend not to realize right away. You said it's better when you don't notice that it's a.
No, I mean that it's optional. But it should not be in your case, it's optional.
In your case, I remember watching that, and it gets to a certain point, and something goes off in your mind toward the end of it, where you realize, oh, they've never cut away. And that's how I felt watching the fight scene that you were describing, which one element you didn't address is it's in a very small space. It's in a men's restroom, so you have 6, I guess a dozen people.
There's like 12 people in there.
Fighting in a small men's room, bashing each other into the walls and urinals, tearing each other apart. That closed atmosphere and really adds something to the fact that, oh, they haven't cut away, that this is all going on at one point all together.
Yeah, and then there's other things you can do with that as well. It's also in the scene, we never flew out the walls. We sort of made a full wall and just stayed within it. So we actually didn't even have a Steadicam. We had like a handheld 35 because the operator is right by there. So that's the other great thing. Doing those fight scenes is always kind of fascinating because it's not just choreography for the actor, it's also the camera operator has to be in the right place so he doesn't get hit in the face. So it's fascinating doing those things, but there's lots of elements you can add to it because I think, you know, modern audiences do know how things are put together. So if you can make it feel as realistic as possible, it gives it like real. Did Nick do his own stunts in that? Yeah.
I mean, it felt so real, and seeing him plow through those guys was so fucking fantastic. It was really like, it was.
Mark, it says clearly don't sweat.
Oh.
That's right. But he is talking about my film, so it's okay.
I do that, sorry. It won't happen again very many times.
Nick Frost did do his own stunts.
And they all did. And you can feel it. It makes that scene so alive.
It's a fun thing to do. I mean, it's a fun thing to do, and I think you can only do it if you've got actors who are really. And the thing is it comes down to music as well. If somebody's a good dancer, they can be a good fighter because it is all about sort of choreography. But then, what you were saying, you've got to then you've got on top of that, you've got to learn the moves, but then you've got to like sell the performance, so it doesn't just look like.
You can't see it.
You can't see it sticking over in their head. But it was a really fun to. Design these fights with like, there's lots of limbs and heads coming off and stuff. Rated R.
You described the crew will gather around for those shots. What's it like when somebody blows it and you're almost there?
I had that on Shaun of the Dead. There's a scene where Simon walks to the store and back when the zombies are first taking over. It's like a 3-minute shot, and the joke of the shot is that he doesn't see the zombies, but we do. They keep getting more and more in the background when he goes into the store, buys something, comes out, goes back home. And that was the first slate that we did of that shoot. It was the first shot that we did. And because it was a low-budget film, we also didn't have the streets locked off. So out of the corner of every frame are these, and also legally you're not allowed to restrict anybody. You can, if somebody wants to come through, you cannot even touch them, otherwise you'll get sued. So there's some poor runner going, please, we're just doing a take. And I think we'd done one take that was really good, except for one guy, this drunk guy who was just not having it, just walked straight through and went, fuck you. Like literally, I'm sorry. Just please be aware they're under 18s.
There literally is, I thought you were joking. It says that, please be aware that the audience may be under 18 years of age.
Nothing they haven't heard before.
So, guys have got a lot to learn. There's some bad guys out there.